The valet didn't even look at my old car when I handed him the keys. My father did. Loudly. "You drove that thing here?" Lucy on Christmas People turned. My brother Ethan smirked. My mother avoided my eyes. I was about to walk inside and let it go like I always did when the valet jogged back toward me holding a different key fob. Black polished with a logo I recognized instantly. "Ms. Mitchell," he said carefully, "your vehicle is ready. Not the one I came in." My father laughed until the car pulled up. Then he stopped. Because it wasn't mine. And somehow, it was. If you're watching from outside the U.S., tell me where you're from and what time it is there right now. I read every comment. And if stories like this hit close to home, you can stay, just don't forget to subscribe. I didn't touch the key fob right away. I could feel my father watching me, waiting for me to fumble to laugh it off, to admit this was some kind of mistake. That was the role I'd played my entire life. The one who didn't quite belong in the version of success he understood. "Go on," Richard said, nodding toward the car like he was daring me. "Don't keep your driver waiting." A few people near the entrance had slowed down, pretending not to stare. Ethan leaned against the railing, arms crossed, a grin he didn't bother hiding. This should be good. I took the keys. They were heavier than they looked. Not just physically, there was something about the moment that felt like it had weight. Like if I handled it wrong, it would shift everything in a way I couldn't take back. The car idled at the curb, headlights cutting through the thin December fog. It was a dark gray Mercedes S-Class. New, clean lines. No plate on the front, yet temporary tag. Quoi, not a rental, not something you accidentally hand to the wrong person. The valet stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that it didn't carry to my family. "Would you like it brought around after dinner, Ms. Mitchell? Or kept ready?" There it was again. That tone. Professional. Certain. Like this wasn't unusual. I paused, then forced myself to sound calm. "After dinner is fine." He nodded immediately. "Of course. No hesitation. No confusion." He walked back toward the car, and for a second I caught my reflection in the window, standing there in a coat I'd bought on sale 3 winters ago, next to a vehicle that cost more than anything my family had ever seen me own. Behind me, Richard let out a short, humorless laugh. "Cute," he said. "Very cute." "So what is this, Lucy?" Some kind of stunt. I turned back toward them. "I didn't ask for that car." Ethan snorted. "Right. Because valets just hand out 6-figure vehicles to random people all the time. I'm serious." My mother finally spoke, her voice careful. "Maybe it's a mix-up. You should go fix it before someone notices. Before someone notices. Not before someone gets in trouble. Not before it causes a problem. Just before it reflects badly on us." I looked at her, then at my father. He was already shaking his head, dismissing me. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said. "You don't think things through. You show up in that car, then this happens, and suddenly we're all standing here looking ridiculous." Something in my chest tightened. Not new. Familiar. Every conversation with him eventually circled back to the same place. "You're not enough. You're not reliable. You make us look bad." I swallowed it. I'd gotten good at that. "Let's just go inside," I said. "No," Richard replied immediately. "You're going to straighten this out first. It's already handled." He said, "I don't care what he said." His voice sharpened, drawing another glance from the people nearby. "You don't leave a situation like this hanging. That's how people get into trouble." The irony almost made me laugh, but I didn't, because something else had started to settle in the back of my mind. That logo. I'd seen it earlier that week. Not on a car, on a file. I turned the key fob over in my hand, tracing the emblem with my thumb. It wasn't just a luxury brand mark. It was a co-branded insignia, subtle but specific. One of the private banking divisions tied to a firm we monitored, a firm that didn't deal with random customers, a firm that worked with high net worth clients, institutional accounts, complex portfolios, people who didn't make mistakes like this. Lucy. Richard's voice cut through my thoughts. Are you even listening? Yes, then explain it. I can't. Not yet. Ethan laughed again. Translation, she has no idea. I met his eyes. That's not what I said. For a second, something flickered across his face. Annoyance. Maybe even a hint of uncertainty. Then it was gone. Whatever he said. Let's go. I'm freezing. He pushed past me toward the entrance. My mother followed, glancing back once like she wanted to say something, then thinking better of it. Richard stayed where he was. You think this makes you look important? He asked quietly. No, because it doesn't. It makes you look like you're pretending. I held his gaze. I'm not pretending. He studied me for a moment like he was trying to decide whether I believed that myself. Then he shook his head and walked inside without another word. I stood there a second longer, the cold finally cutting through my coat. The valet had parked the Mercedes a few spaces down. Engine off now, lights dimmed, waiting. I pulled out my phone. There was already a message from Daniel. Unknown number flagged under Mitchell Family Network. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told him anything about tonight. Not about my family, not about where I'd be. I typed back. I'm with them right now. What did you find? The reply came faster than I expected. Enough to open a case. I stared at the screen. Then I looked up at the restaurant doors where my family had just disappeared inside. The warmth, the noise, the version of Christmas they believed in, it was all on the other side of that glass. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I was walking into it as one of them. My phone buzzed again. Call me. This can't wait. I tightened my grip on the key fob, the cold metal pressing into my palm. Then I stepped toward the door anyway, because whatever this was, whatever that car meant, it wasn't a mistake. And somehow, it was already tied to my father. The hostess smiled like nothing was wrong, like families didn't fracture quietly over linen-covered tables and polite wine lists. Reservation for Mitchell, my father said, already stepping past me. Of course he did. We were seated near the back in a private alcove that felt designed for conversations people didn't want overheard. Warm lighting, soft music. Just enough distance from the rest of the room to feel exclusive. Or contained. Ethan slid into his seat and immediately picked up the wine list. Let's not do the cheap stuff tonight, he said, glancing at me. We've already had enough embarrassment for one evening. I didn't respond. I was still thinking about Daniel's message, about the logo on the key fob, about the way the valet had said my name like it belonged in a different context. My father ordered for the table without asking anyone. A bottle he'd probably chosen more for the name than the taste. Then he leaned back, satisfied. Now he said, looking directly at me, Are you going to explain what that was out there I told you? I don't know. You expect me to believe that I expect you to listen. He gave a short, dismissive laugh. That would require you to say something that makes sense. My mother shifted in her seat. Richard. No, he said, cutting her off. I'm tired of this. She shows up like this every holiday, quiet, distant, like she's above everything, but then something like this happens and suddenly we're supposed to take her seriously? I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest. Not explosive, controlled, the kind that builds over years. I didn't ask for that car, I said evenly, and I'm not trying to prove anything to you. Then what are you doing? He pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're playing a role you haven't earned. Ethan chuckled under his breath. Maybe she finally got promoted from whatever it is she does. That landed exactly the way he intended. I folded my hands on the table. What do you think I do, Ethan? He shrugged. Something with numbers. Or paperwork. I don't know. You've never exactly been clear. I've been clear enough. No, my father cut in. You've been vague. There's a difference. Before I could answer, a man approached the table. Mid-50s, clean suit, confident posture. I recognized him immediately, even though we'd never spoken face to face. Charles Harris? Richard, he said warmly, extending a hand. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to introduce myself properly. My father stood, his entire demeanor shifting. Softer. Respectful. Charles, of course. Please join us. Harris nodded, then his eyes moved to me, and stayed there. Lucy, he said, like he was confirming something he'd already suspected. I didn't stand. Mr. Harris. Ethan glanced between us. You two know each other. Harris smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. We may have crossed paths professionally. That was generous. I held his gaze. Indirectly. My father looked confused for half a second, then quickly recovered. Well, that's a small world, he said. Lucy doesn't usually talk about work. I've noticed, Harris replied. He took the empty seat at the end of the table without asking. The server arrived with the wine poured carefully, then left us alone again. Harris picked up his glass but didn't drink. So he said casually, How long have you been with your firm, Lucy? There it was, a question that sounded harmless to anyone else. I met his eyes, long enough to understand how certain structures work. A beat of silence. Then he nodded slowly. That can be useful. My father cleared his throat. Charles has been helping us with some investment opportunities, he said, like he was trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Very solid returns so far. I'm sure, I said. Ethan leaned forward. Actually, yeah. We just brought in a few more people this month. Friends, mostly. They're already seeing gains. My stomach tightened. Gains, I repeated. Already. Yeah, he said. Why, I looked at Harris. He was watching me carefully now, measuring every word. Just curious how those are calculated, I said. Given the timing. My father's expression hardened. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said calmly, that returns that appear too quickly usually come from somewhere other than actual profit. Ethan scoffed. Or maybe you just don't understand how this works. I understand more than you think. Harris finally took a sip of his wine. Lucy. He said, his tone still polite but edged. Now there are many ways to structure investments. Not all of them are obvious from the outside. I agree, I said. Some of them are designed that way. Another pause. My mother set her glass down. Can we not do this tonight? She asked quietly. It's Christmas. My father ignored her. His attention was locked on me now. If you have something to say, he said, say it. I could feel the moment shifting. This was where I usually backed down. Changed the subject. Let it go. But Daniel's message was still sitting in my pocket. Enough to open a case. I chose my words carefully. I'm saying that if you're taking money from people with the expectation of stable returns, you need to be very clear about where that money is actually going. Ethan rolled his eyes. Here we go. Lucy, my father said sharply, you don't get to walk in here and question my business in front of my partner. I'm not questioning, I replied. I'm pointing out a risk. Harris set his glass down. And what risk would that be? I looked at him directly. That the model you're using depends on continuous inflow to sustain early payouts. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that makes people look at each other without wanting to. Ethan laughed, but it sounded forced. You're describing what every investment fund ever... No, I said. I'm describing one specific pattern. My father stood up slightly from his seat, then sat back down like he was trying to control his reaction. That's enough, he said. You don't know what you're talking about. I didn't raise my voice. Then it shouldn't be a problem to show where the returns are coming from. Harris's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. You're very confident, he said. I'm careful, I replied. He held my gaze for another second, then smiled again. Smooth. Controlled. Well, he said, standing, this has been... interesting. Richard, we'll continue our discussion tomorrow. My father nodded quickly. Of course. Harris turned to me one last time. I'm sure we'll have a chance to speak again, Lucy. I'm sure we will. He walked away. Ethan let out a breath. What was that? My father didn't answer him. He was still looking at me. You just embarrassed me in front of him, he said quietly. I asked a question. You accused him. You accused us. I stated a possibility. His jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I held his gaze. Maybe I do. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't wait. I pulled it out under the table and glanced at the screen. New message from Daniel. We identified multiple accounts. Your father is listed as an authorized signatory. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. That was the moment it stopped being a suspicion and became something I couldn't ignore. I looked up at my father, then at Ethan. Neither of them understood what had just shifted. Not yet. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. Dinner's getting cold, my mother said, her voice almost pleading. No one moved. Because even without the words, something had already broken. The plates eventually arrived, but no one really ate. My father cut into his steak with more force than necessary. Ethan kept checking his phone like he was waiting for something to prove him right. My mother tried to keep conversation alive, asking about neutral things, traffic, the weather, anything that didn't involve money. It didn't work. I picked up my glass mostly to give my hands something to do. My phone buzzed again in my lap. Daniel. I hesitated for half a second, then stood. I need to take this. My father didn't look up. Of course you do. I walked out of the alcove and into the quieter hallway near the restrooms. The music faded behind me, replaced by the low hum of conversations and the occasional clink of dishes. I answered. Lucy. Daniel didn't waste time. We've been tracking a network tied to that firm you flagged last quarter. It just expanded. How expanded? 3 new feeder accounts, all linked to the same private investment pool. My grip tightened on the phone. Names. There was a pause. You're not going to like this. I already don't. Richard Mitchell is listed as an authorized signatory on 2 of them, and he exhaled. Ethan Mitchell appears as a distribution intermediary on at least 1. I leaned against the wall, the cold tile grounding me. Are you sure we verified the digital signatures? Multiple transactions. Not small amounts, Lucy. This isn't passive involvement. I closed my eyes for a moment. How many investors? Preliminary count 37, mostly retirees, some small business owners. Average contribution, around 80,000. I did the math automatically. It wasn't a small operation. Where's the money going? That's the problem. It's moving through layered accounts, then partially recycled as returns to early participants. Classic pattern. Ponzi structure, I said quietly. We're not labeling it yet, Daniel replied, but the indicators are strong. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the key fob, still in my other hand. And Harris, I asked. Central figure. But careful. He's insulated himself well, uses intermediaries, people with clean reputations. Like my father. Daniel, I said, choosing my words carefully, if I formally step into this, I'll have direct access to internal records faster than anyone else on the team. I know, he said. That's why I called you first. And you're okay with the conflict. No, he admitted. But Margaret already signed off on a conditional involvement. You'll be monitored. Every move documented. That was fair. Then I'm in. There was a brief silence. You're sure? No, I said. But I'm not walking away from this. Okay, then we do it right. No shortcuts, no personal moves outside protocol. I understand. And Lucy, he added, once this becomes official, you don't get to protect them anymore. I looked back toward the dining room where my family sat behind a thin wall and a lifetime of expectations. I haven't been protecting them, I said quietly. I've been trying to understand them. And now I opened my eyes. Now I follow the evidence. I ended the call and stood there for a moment longer than necessary, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what it would cost. When I walked back to the table, the atmosphere had shifted again. My father was quieter now, not calmer, just more controlled. Ethan looked irritated, tapping his fingers against the table. My mother gave me a small, searching look as I sat down. Everything okay? She asked. Yes. That was the last simple answer I was going to give. My father set his knife down. So he said, "Are we done with the theories?" I folded my hands. I spoke to a colleague. Ethan rolled his eyes. Of course you did. And my father asked, and I think you need to take a closer look at the structure of what you're involved in. His expression hardened instantly. I told you I'm not accusing you, I interrupted. I'm telling you there are patterns that could expose you to serious legal risk. Legal risk? Ethan scoffed. We're making money, Lucy. That's not illegal. Making money isn't, I said. But how you make it can be. My father leaned forward. You don't get to walk in here after years of keeping your life a secret and suddenly act like an expert on my business. I'm not acting. Then what are you doing? I held his gaze, trying to make sure you understand what could happen. To who he snapped. To us, or to the people who are finally getting a return on their investment. There it was, the justification. I nodded slowly. Both. Ethan laughed under his breath. You always do this. You find a way to make everything sound like a problem. Because sometimes it is. No, he said. Because you don't like that we're doing well without you. That stung more than I expected. Not because it was true, but because it was the version of me they'd chosen to believe in for so long. My mother reached for her glass again, her hand unsteady. Can we please just finish dinner? My father didn't look at her. You're going to drop this, he said to me. Right now. I can't. His eyes narrowed. Can't or won't. I didn't answer right away, because the honest answer was both. He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a problem he hadn't solved yet. "You think you're helping?" he said finally. "But you're not. You're interfering in something you don't understand." "I understand enough." "No," he said quietly. "You understand just enough to be dangerous." I let that sit for a second. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. "I didn't want to do this here," I said. Ethan frowned. "Do what?" I turned the screen toward them. A single document. Not everything, just one piece. A transaction summary, highlighted entries, account names, dates, and a signature. Richard Mitchell. My father's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. "What is that A sample?" I said. "From a larger set of records." Ethan leaned closer, his confidence slipping just slightly. "That doesn't mean anything. It could be... It's verified," I said. "Multiple times." My father's jaw tightened. "Where did you get that?" "That's not the question you should be asking." "Then what is?" I met his eyes. "You should be asking what else exists." Silence settled over the table again. Not confusion this time. Recognition. My mother looked between us, her face pale. "Richard." He didn't respond, because for the first time that night, he didn't look certain. And that was when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was something he had chosen, something he thought he could control, until now. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel. "Harris is pushing to close the next round early. We think they're trying to move funds before exposure." I locked the screen and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I looked at my father. "They're accelerating," I said quietly. Ethan blinked. What I didn't take my eyes off Richard. They're trying to move the money before anyone stops them. My father's expression shifted just for a second. "Enough." Enough to confirm what I needed, and enough to change what I had to do next. No one touched their food after that. My father didn't deny it. That was the part that stayed with me. Not immediately, not reflexively. He didn't laugh it off or call it a misunderstanding. He just went quiet. Ethan was the first to break. "This is insane," he said, pushing his chair back slightly. "You're pulling up random documents and acting like you just exposed some huge crime. Dad, tell her." Richard didn't look at him. "Tell me what I asked calmly." "That this is normal," Ethan snapped. "That you're misreading it." I kept my voice even. "Then explain the structure to me. Where are the returns actually coming from?" "They're coming from the fund," he said quickly. "Which fund?" He hesitated. Just a second. And that was enough. My father finally spoke. "That's not something we need to discuss here." Then where I asked. "Because it's already being discussed somewhere else." His eyes snapped to mine. "What does that mean?" "It means this isn't just internal anymore." My mother inhaled sharply. "Lucy?" I didn't look at her. "There are already people reviewing these accounts." Ethan shook his head. No, that's not possible." "It is. How would you even know that?" I held his gaze. "Because I'm one of them." The words landed harder than anything else I'd said that night. Ethan blinked. "What?" My father's voice dropped. "Explain." I took a breath, not to steady myself, but to make sure I didn't rush. "I work in financial compliance and investigation," I said. "Specifically, I analyze transaction patterns tied to fraud risk, regulatory violations, and investor protection cases." Ethan stared at me like I'd just switched languages. What I've been doing it for years. Why didn't you ever say anything? My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because every time I tried to explain my work, it was dismissed, I said. So I stopped. Silence. Not the tense kind from earlier. Something heavier. My father leaned forward slowly. And you're telling me, he said, choosing each word carefully, that you're involved in a review that includes me. I'm telling you that your name appears in a set of transactions currently under review. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. It's the beginning of it. Ethan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. This is ridiculous. You're making it sound like we're criminals. I'm not making it sound like anything I said. I'm telling you how it will be interpreted if the structure isn't transparent. My father's expression hardened again, but there was something else underneath it now. Calculation. You should have told me, he said. When I asked, before or after you started signing off on accounts you didn't fully understand? His jaw tightened. I understand exactly what I'm doing. Then explain it. I don't have to explain anything to you. You will have to explain it to someone. That landed. Ethan looked between us. Okay, stop. Both of you. This is getting out of control. It already is, I said. No, it's not, he insisted. We're making money. People are happy. Nobody's complaining. Not yet. What's that supposed to mean? It means that as long as new money keeps coming in, everything looks stable, I said. But the moment that slows down, it won't. He cut in. You don't know that. I do, he said louder now, because we have more people joining every week. I nodded slowly. Exactly. He froze. Not fully, but enough to realize what I was pointing at. That's not, he started, then stopped. My father shot him a look. Sharp. Warning. Ethan looked down at the table. That was the first time he didn't argue. My mother pressed her hand to her temple. I don't understand any of this, she said. Richard? What is she talking about? It's complicated, he replied. No, I said quietly. It's not. All three of them looked at me. It's simple, I continued. Money comes in from new investors. A portion of that money is used to pay earlier investors, making it look like the fund is generating returns. The rest is moved through layered accounts to obscure the source. My mother's face drained of color. That's illegal. My father didn't answer. Ethan shook his head. No, that's not what we're doing. Then show me where the actual profits are generated, I said. We have assets, he said quickly. Real investments. Then it should be easy to document. He opened his mouth and closed it. My father stood up. That's enough, he said, his voice low but firm. We are not having this conversation here. I looked up at him. Then where? At home, he replied. Privately. Why privately? Because this is family business. I held his gaze. It stopped being just family business when other people's money got involved. His eyes narrowed. You're crossing a line. No, I said. I'm drawing one. For a second, I thought he might explode. Instead, he took a step back, composed himself. Fine, he said. We'll talk tomorrow. At the house. All of this, he gestured toward my phone. The table me stays between us until then. There it was. The request. Not to fix anything. To contain it. Ethan looked relieved. Yeah, that makes sense. We can sort it out. My mother nodded quickly. Yes, please. Let's just go home and talk. I didn't answer right away, because I knew exactly what he was asking. Time. Time to adjust. To move things. To close gaps. Time that the people in those accounts didn't have. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look to know who it was. They're accelerating, I said quietly. My father froze. Who is Ethan asked. I didn't take my eyes off Richard. The people you're working with, I said. They're trying to move funds before anything becomes official. That's not, he started. Don't I cut in? Not unless you're ready to be honest. Silence. Then my father exhaled slowly. You don't understand the pressure we're under, he said. There it was. Not denial. Explanation. I leaned back slightly. Then help me understand. He hesitated. For the first time that night, he looked tired. Some of these investors, he said, they're expecting returns we can't delay. If we pause now, it raises questions. Questions you should have answered before taking their money. It wasn't supposed to work like this, he said. Ethan looked at him. Dad, Richard, ignored him. Harris said the structure was temporary. He continued. That once the larger deal closed, everything would stabilize. And you believed him, I said. I verified what I could. Not enough. His jaw tightened again, but he didn't argue. Because he knew. Ethan shook his head, his voice cracking slightly. So, what are you saying? That we're... what? In trouble. I looked at him. Right now, I said, you're exposed. My mother covered her mouth. My father closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them. What happens next? He asked. That question changed everything. Because it wasn't defensive, it was practical. I answered honestly. That depends on what you do before the next transaction cycle closes. Ethan frowned. When is that? I didn't look away from my father. He already knows I said. Richard didn't deny it, and that silence said more than anything else. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was overwhelmed, but because everything finally fit. Patterns I'd studied for years, structures I'd flagged in other people's files, they were all there, just closer, personal now, unavoidable. By morning, I had already made my decision. I got to the office early. The building was still quiet, the kind of silence that made everything feel more deliberate. Margaret was already there. She didn't look surprised to see me. You look like you didn't sleep, she said not unkindly. I didn't. She nodded once. Sit. I closed the door behind me and took the chair across from her desk. For the record, she said, folding her hands, this is where we formalize your role. After this point, everything you do is part of an active investigation. No side conversations, no independent actions, no family negotiations outside documented channels. I understand. Say it clearly. I will follow protocol. Completely. She held my gaze for a second longer, then nodded. Good. Because once you're in, you don't get to step back when it gets uncomfortable. It's already uncomfortable. That's not the same thing. She slid a folder across the desk. Preliminary structure, she said. What we have so far. I opened it. Account trees, flow diagrams, dates, money moving in tight cycles, deposits, transfers, partial payouts, and names. I found my father's within seconds, not hidden, not even particularly buried, just placed in a way that made it look routine. Authorized signatory, secondary approvals, Occasional routing authority. Enough to matter. Walk me through your interpretation, Margaret said. I traced one of the transaction paths with my finger. New investor funds enter through feeder accounts, I said. Their split sum portion goes to earlier investors as returns. The rest moves through layered entities to obscure origin. Keep going. The cycle repeats. As long as inflow continues, the system appears stable. And when it doesn't, it collapses. I said simply. Margaret nodded. That's consistent with what we're seeing. I turned another page. There's something else I added. The timing. What about it? These transactions are tightening, I said. Shorter gaps between inflow and payout. That usually means pressure. Pressure from either investors asking questions or operators trying to extract remaining liquidity before exposure. She leaned back slightly. Which do you think it is? Both, I said. A small pause. Then she said Harris is moving faster than we expected. I looked up. You're sure it's him leading? We're confident he's central, she replied. But he's insulated. That's where people like your father come in. The words landed differently in the office than they had the night before. Less emotional, more precise. I nodded slowly. Clean reputations, social trust, access to networks that wouldn't question them. Exactly. I closed the folder. What's the next step? I asked. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied me. Before we get there, she said, I need to know something. I waited. If your father tries to contact you outside of documented channels, what do you do? I didn't hesitate. I document it. Then I don't engage. And if he asks for time, he's already had it. And if he tries to move funds, I met her eyes, then we act before he finishes. That was the answer she was looking for. Good, she said. She stood and walked to the glass board behind her desk. Here's where we are, she said, marking a timeline. Next transaction cycle is projected within 48 hours. My chest tightened slightly. 48, possibly sooner, she said. We're seeing early movement indicators. I thought about what my father had said. Some of these investors, they're expecting returns we can't delay. When that cycle starts, Margaret continued, we'll have a narrow window to intervene. Freeze accounts, secure records, prevent further transfers. And if we miss it, she didn't sugarcoat it. Then a significant portion of the funds disappears. I nodded. Understood. She capped the marker and turned back to me. I'm assigning you to transaction analysis and internal pattern verification. You'll work directly with Daniel. Everything you uncover feeds into the legal team. Okay. And Lucy? Yes. This is where it gets complicated. It already was. Your father may not see himself as doing anything wrong, she said. People in his position rarely do. I know. They think they're managing a temporary imbalance, that they'll fix it before anyone gets hurt. And by the time they realize they can't, I said it's too late. She gave a small nod. Exactly. I picked up the folder again. I want access to the raw transaction logs, I said. Not just summaries. You'll have it. And communication records if available. We're working on that. I stood. Then I'll start there. As I reached the door, Margaret spoke again. Lucy. I turned. Whatever happens next, she said you didn't create this. I held her gaze. I know I said, but that didn't mean I wouldn't be the one to end it. By the time I got back to my desk, Daniel had already sent over the expanded dataset. I opened the files and started mapping connections, names, dates, amounts, patterns. Within minutes, something stood out. A cluster of transactions scheduled, queued, not yet executed. High volume, coordinated timing. I leaned closer to the screen. This is it, I muttered. Daniel appeared at my desk. You see it? Yeah, I said. They're not just accelerating. What do you mean? I pointed to the timestamps. They're consolidating? He frowned, pulling everything together before moving it out. Exactly. How long do we have? I checked the latest entry, then checked it again. My stomach dropped, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty. Not 48 hours, I said. Daniel's expression shifted. How long I looked at him, then back at the screen. Less than 24. He exhaled sharply. I'll alert Margaret. Do it, I said. As he walked away, I leaned back in my chair for the first time that morning. Less than a day. That was all the time between what my father thought he could still control and what was about to become public, irreversible, and permanent. My phone vibrated on the desk. I glanced down. Richard. Calling. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I flipped the phone over and didn't answer, because whatever he wanted to say now was already too late to change what came next. I didn't answer the second call either, or the third. By the fourth, my phone had stopped vibrating long enough for me to notice how quiet everything else had become. The office wasn't loud to begin with, but now it felt focused. Like everyone had shifted into the same narrow window of time. Less than 24 hours. Daniel came back with Margaret behind him. That alone told me things had escalated. She saw the cue Daniel said. Margaret didn't sit. Walk me through it. I turned my monitor slightly so both of them could see. These transactions here, I said, highlighting a cluster. They're staged. Same routing pattern, same destination layers, just split across multiple accounts. To avoid detection thresholds, Daniel added. Margaret nodded. Volume combined, I said. Rough estimate just under 12 million. She didn't react visibly, but she didn't need to. And your father, she asked. I zoomed in on one segment. Authorization sequence, I said. Primary routing initiated by Harris-controlled entity. Secondary approvals, Richard Mitchell. Margaret studied it for a second. So he's not just involved. He's operational. Yes. Daniel crossed his arms. That means if these go through, he's directly tied to the final movement. Which gives us leverage, Margaret said. But only if we act before execution. I nodded. The timestamps are tightening. First batch is scheduled to initiate tonight. What time? I checked again. Between 9 and 11:30 p.m. Staggered releases. Daniel exhaled. That's not much of a window. No, I said. It's not. Margaret straightened. We move now. I'll coordinate with legal for a preemptive freeze authorization. Daniel. I want real-time monitoring on every flagged account. Already setting it up. She looked at me. Lucy, you stay on pattern verification. If anything shifts even slightly, I want to know immediately. Understood. She paused for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. And document every attempt your father makes to contact you. I didn't respond right away, because as if on cue, my phone lit up again. Richard. I turned it face down without picking it up. Noted, I said. By early afternoon, the room we'd moved into didn't feel like an office anymore. Screens, data streams, timelines, everything narrowing toward one point. 9 p.m. I worked through transaction paths, flagging inconsistencies, confirming linkages, making sure nothing we presented could be challenged as incomplete. This was the part I was good at. Not the confrontation, not the family dynamics. This. Clarity. Around 2:15 p.m., Daniel leaned over my desk again. "We've got communication polls," he said. "Limited but enough. From Who Harris's network. Some internal messages." I turned toward him. "Anything direct?" "Not yet, but there's something you should see." He forwarded a thread, short, efficient. No wasted words. "Harris. We close tonight. No delays." Unknown. "What about the Mitchell accounts, Harris?" "He'll sign. He always does." I stared at the last line longer than I should have. "He'll sign. He always does." Daniel watched my reaction carefully. "That match your read?" "Yes," I said quietly. Meaning Harris isn't worried about him," I said. "He's relying on him. Because of trust. Because of habit." I corrected. "Because my father has already committed enough that backing out now feels worse than continuing." Daniel nodded slowly. "Sunk cost." "Exactly." I leaned back slightly. "He doesn't see an exit that doesn't cost him everything," I added. "And you're about to take that choice away. I'm about to make the consequences real," I said. There was a difference. At least to me. At 4:30 p.m., Margaret called for a brief. "Preliminary approval is in progress," she said. "We don't have full freeze authorization yet, but we can initiate holds on flagged accounts if we hit the trigger conditions." Daniel frowned. "Define trigger." "Execution attempt," she replied. "The moment funds start moving, we act, and if they move faster than expected, I asked. Then we intercept mid-transfer." "That's risky." "Yes," she said. "But letting it complete is worse." I nodded. "Lucy," she added, "any changes on your end?" "Nothing structural," I said. "But the staging suggests they might compress the schedule if they sense pressure." "Do they know they're being watched?" "Not officially," I said. But I hesitated. "My father knows something is wrong," I said. "He just doesn't know how much we know." Margaret considered that. "Then assume unpredictability." "I already am." At 6:10 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call. A message from my father. "We need to talk. Not about last night. About tonight." I stared at it. Then another message came. "You don't understand what's about to happen." I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I typed back. "Then explain it." The response came slower this time. "Meet me. 1 hour. Just you." I felt Daniel's presence before I saw him. "Everything okay?" he asked. I turned the screen toward him. He read it, then looked at me. "You're not going?" "No," I said immediately. He nodded once. Good. I didn't move, because something about the message didn't feel like deflection. It felt like urgency. Margaret stepped in. "What is it I showed her?" She read it carefully. "Could be a stall tactic," she said. "Or not," I replied. She looked at me. "You're considering it." "I'm considering what he thinks I don't understand," I said. "That's not a reason to walk into an uncontrolled situation." "I wouldn't go alone," I said. "You wouldn't go at all," Daniel added. I stayed quiet, because there was one possibility none of us had said out loud yet. If my father was trying to warn me, then something had changed. Margaret crossed her arms. "If you go, it's monitored. Public location, limited time, and you don't deviate from protocol." Daniel looked at her. "We're actually entertaining this. We're evaluating it," she corrected. She turned back to me. "Lucy, if he's trying to tell you something relevant to the timeline, we need it. But if this is an attempt to delay or manipulate, I'll know," I said. She held my gaze. "Be sure," she said. I nodded. By 7:05 p.m., I was sitting in a cafe 3 blocks from the office. Public, visible, controlled. I chose a table near the window, not because it felt safer, but because it made everything easier to see. My phone was on the table. Daniel and Margaret knew exactly where I was, and exactly how long I'd stay. 7:15, 7:20, 7:27. At 7:32, the door opened. My father stepped inside. He looked different, not weaker, but stripped of something. Confidence, maybe. He spotted me immediately and walked over. No hesitation, no performance, just direct. He sat down across from me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "They moved it up." My pulse didn't spike. It settled. How much, I asked. "Hours," he said. "Not tonight." I held his gaze. When he didn't look away, within the next 2 hours, everything in my mind shifted instantly. All the timelines, all the preparation, all the assumptions. Gone. Why, I asked. "They think someone's watching," he said. Not officially, but enough to make Harris nervous. "Because of me." A pause. "Yes." I exhaled slowly. "Then you need to leave," he said. I didn't react. "Leave?" I repeated. "This doesn't have to involve you," he said. "You can step back. Let it play out." "There are $12 million in queued transactions," I said. "It already involves me." "It involves me," he corrected. "And I can handle it." I looked at him. Really looked. For the first time that day, I saw it. Not denial, not control. Fear. "Can you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. And that was all I needed. My phone buzzed. "Daniel." I didn't pick it up. Not yet. Because this was the moment everything turned. And whatever I did next would decide how it ended. I let Daniel's call ring out. Not because I didn't care, because I needed 10 more seconds. 10 seconds to understand whether the man sitting across from me was trying to protect me, or protect himself. "Tell me exactly what's changing," I said. My father's hands were flat on the table. Still. Controlled. "Harris thinks there's a leak," he said. "He doesn't know where, but he's not waiting to find out. So he compresses the schedule," I said. "Yes, which means everything moves faster. Less traceability, less time to react." He nodded once. I leaned forward slightly. "And you? What about me? Are you still signing?" A pause. Longer than it should have been. "Then I don't have a choice." There it was again. Not denial. Resignation. "You always have a choice," I said. "Not when you're already this far in," he replied quietly. "You don't understand how these things work." "I understand exactly how they work," I said. "That's the problem." He shook his head. "No. You understand the theory. You don't understand what it's like when people are depending on you, when they've trusted you with everything they have." "They trusted you," I corrected, "not Harris. And if I walk away now," he pressed, "what happens to them?" "They lose money either way," I said. "The difference is whether you keep making it worse." His jaw tightened. "You think it's that simple." "It is no," he said, leaning in slightly. "It's not. If I keep this moving just long enough, we can stabilize it. There's a larger deal coming. Real assets. Real returns." I didn't interrupt, because I'd heard this before. Not from him. From case files. From transcripts. From people who genuinely believed they could fix something that was already broken. That's what he told you I said. It's what I verified. You verified what he showed you. I corrected. Not what actually exists. His eyes flashed with irritation. You don't know that. I do, I said, because I've seen this exact structure before. It doesn't stabilize. It expands until it collapses. Silence. For a moment, the noise of the cafe came back into focus. Cups, conversations, the normal rhythm of people who had no idea what was about to happen in the next 2 hours. My father leaned back. What are you going to do? He asked. That question felt different now, not confrontational, not defensive, just direct. I answered just as directly. I'm going to stop the transfers. His expression didn't change immediately, but something behind it did. You can't, he said. I can. You don't have the authority. I have enough. And if you're wrong, he pressed, if you freeze accounts based on incomplete information, do you understand what that does? To reputations, to lives. I do, I said. Do you understand what happens if I don't? He didn't answer, because he did. I picked up my phone. This time I answered. Daniel. Where are you? He asked immediately. I'm with him, I said. He just confirmed the schedule moved up. We're looking at execution within 2 hours. There was a pause. Then Margaret's initiating pre-freeze conditions now. Good, I said. You need to tighten monitoring on the feeder accounts. They'll likely start with smaller test transfers before full movement. Already flagged, he replied. We're watching for it. I glanced at my father. He was listening. Of course he was. They think there's a leak I added, which means they might adjust routing mid-cycle. Daniel exhaled. That complicates things. It always does. Get back here, he said. We need you on the floor when this starts. I'm leaving now. I ended the call. My father watched me for a second longer. You've already decided, he said. Yes. And there's nothing I can say to change that. No. Another pause. Then he nodded. Slowly, like he was accepting something he'd been resisting. What happens to me? He asked. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even fearful. Just practical. I held his gaze. That depends on what you do next, I said. His brow tightened slightly. Meaning if you continue to authorize transfers after this point, I said you're directly tied to the final movement of funds. And if I don't, then there's a record of where you stopped. He considered that. You're asking me to walk away in the middle of it, he said. I'm asking you to stop making it worse. And Harris. He'll keep going, I said. With or without you. My father let out a quiet breath. And if I don't sign, he said he'll know. Yes. And you think he just lets that go? No. Silence settled between us again. Different this time. Not tension. Not conflict. A decision forming. My father looked down at his hands, then back up at me. For what it's worth, he said, I didn't start this to hurt anyone. I know. That doesn't change what it became. No, I said. It doesn't. He nodded once, then reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. I watched him unlock it. Scroll. Stop. This is the account, he said, turning the screen toward me. Primary routing for tonight. I leaned in. Account number. Routing chain. Timing window. Everything I needed. Why are you showing me this? I asked. He met my eyes. Because you're right, he said. The words didn't come with relief or redemption, just clarity. I can't fix it, he added. I nodded, but I can stop being part of it. That was the shift. Not dramatic, not loud, but final. I took a screenshot and sent it to Daniel immediately, then stood. We need to go, I said. He didn't move right away. Lucy. I paused. I meant what I said last night, he said. About you. Not understanding. I waited. I was wrong. I didn't respond. Not because it didn't matter, but because this wasn't the moment for that. We'll deal with the rest later, I said. If there was a later. I walked toward the door. He followed a step behind. Not leading, not controlling, just there. And for the first time in years, he wasn't trying to tell me what to do. By the time I got back to the office, everything was already in motion. Screens filled with live transaction feeds, alerts triggering in rapid succession. Daniel met me halfway across the room. We got your data, he said. It matches what we're seeing. Any movement yet? Small test transfers. Just started. I nodded. Full cycle will follow? Margaret stepped in. Legal authorization is in place. The moment we confirm execution, we freeze. I took my seat, eyes on the screen, numbers shifting, accounts activating, and then there it was. The first real transfer, not staged, not cued, executed. I didn't hesitate. That's it, I said. That's the trigger. Margaret didn't blink. Do it. Daniel's fingers moved across the keyboard. Commands sent. Systems responding. And one by one, the accounts began to lock. Not all at once, but fast enough. Faster than they expected. I watched the transaction flow stutter, pause, then fail. Across multiple accounts. Daniel exhaled sharply. We got it. Margaret's voice was steady. Confirm full freeze. Working on it. On the screen, more failures, more blocks, more stopped transfers. $12 million mid-motion cut off. And somewhere Charles Harris was watching it happen. My phone buzzed. I didn't need to check. I already knew who it was, because this was the moment he realized something had gone very wrong. The first thing that changed wasn't the data, it was the silence. For a few seconds after the freeze commands executed, no one in the room spoke. Not because we didn't know what had happened, but because we were all waiting to see if it would hold. On my screen, the transaction logs stopped moving. Then one by one, status flags flipped. Pending to blocked. In progress to failed. Queued to frozen. Daniel leaned closer. They're hitting resistance across all primary channels. Check secondary routes, I said. He'll try to reroute. Already on it. Margaret didn't move from where she stood behind us. Confirm full coverage. Daniel's fingers moved quickly. Primary, secondary, and tertiary accounts are all responding to the hold. Any leakage, she asked. Minimal, he said. Small amounts got through during the first test phase. Nothing compared to the total. I exhaled slowly. We hadn't stopped everything, but we'd stopped enough. And more importantly, we'd stopped the system from completing its cycle. That was the part Harris couldn't recover from. My phone vibrated again. This time I picked it up. Unknown number, I answered. Lucy Mitchell. A pause. Then a voice I recognized immediately. Impressive. Charles Harris. Calm. Controlled. Almost amused. You move faster than I expected, he continued. I didn't respond right away, because anything I said here would matter. You miscalculated, I said finally. A quiet chuckle. Did I? You assumed no one would interrupt the cycle. I assumed he corrected that the people involved understood what was at stake. I glanced at my father. He was standing near the back of the room now. Not part of the operation, but not removed from it either. Watching. I understand exactly what's at stake, I said. Do you? Harris asked. Because from where I'm standing, you just froze millions of dollars that people are expecting to see returned. They'll see it, I said. Through the proper channels. That's not how this works. That's exactly how it works now. Another pause. Then his tone shifted slightly sharper. You think this ends here? No, I said. I think it starts here. Silence. Then, you've made this very public, he said. That has consequences. It already did, I replied. For your father, he added. I didn't look away from the screen. He made his choices. And you made yours, Harris said. Let's see how they hold up. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Daniel glanced at me. Harris. Yes. What did he say? That he's not done. Margaret nodded once. He won't be. But he's lost control of the timeline. That was the key. In these systems, control of timing was everything. Without it, the structure collapsed under its own weight. Legal is ready, she added. We moved to formal action. The next 48 hours didn't feel like time. They felt like compression. Statements taken, accounts audited, victims contacted, everything moving forward at a pace that didn't allow for second thoughts. I stayed in the analysis room as long as I was needed. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't walk away halfway through. At some point late the next night, Daniel handed me a printout. Preliminary charges, he said. I scanned it. Fraud, misrepresentation, unauthorized financial activity, multiple counts, multiple names. Harris at the center. And under him, Richard Mitchell. I didn't react immediately because this wasn't new information. It was just official now. Daniel watched me carefully. You okay? Yes. He nodded like he believed me enough not to push further. You did what you had to do, he said. I know. That doesn't make it easy. No. I said. It doesn't. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no surprises. Just a room full of people facing the consequences of decisions that had seemed manageable when they made them. My father didn't look at me when he entered. He didn't avoid me either. He just moved forward. Like he'd already accepted where this was going. Ethan was there too. Quieter than I'd ever seen him. He didn't sit next to our father. That was new. The proceedings were structured. Evidence presented. Transaction flows explained. Investor statements read into record. I was called to speak not as a daughter, but as an analyst. That mattered. I kept my voice steady, focused on facts, patterns, verification, not emotions, not history, just what could be proven. When I finished, I stepped back without looking at them, because this part wasn't about us. It was about what had been done. The shift came later, not in the courtroom, but in the hallway. Ethan found me first. He didn't look angry or defensive, just uncertain. You knew, he said. It wasn't an accusation, just a realization. I suspected, I said. And you still, he stopped himself. Still what? Went through with it. I held his gaze. Yes. He nodded slowly. I didn't know he said. Not really. I know. I thought it was just how things worked, he added. You trust the system. You trust the people running it. And when the system is built on trust alone, I said it's easy to misuse it. He looked down. Am I in trouble? There it was, the question he hadn't been ready to ask before. That depends on what you did, I said, and what you do next. He swallowed. I told them everything. I know. He looked up. You do? Yes. A small pause. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Not relief, not comfort. Just acceptance. He walked away without another word. My father spoke to me last, not in the courtroom, not in front of anyone else, just outside the building, cold air, quiet street, no audience. I signed everything they asked for, he said. I know. I told them what I knew about Harris. I know. He nodded once. That doesn't fix it. No, I said. It doesn't. A pause. Then, you were right. The words didn't feel like victory. They felt late. I wasn't trying to be, I said. I know, he looked at me then, really looked. I thought I could manage it, he said. Control it. Keep everyone whole. That's what everyone thinks at the beginning. And at the end, I held his gaze. At the end, I said, you find out what it actually cost. He nodded slowly. Lucy. I waited. I'm sorry. I believed him. That was the complicated part. I know I said, but knowing didn't change what had happened, or what came next. He seemed to understand that, because he didn't ask for anything else. Not forgiveness, not time, just acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked away, and this time I didn't follow. The first Christmas after everything, I didn't go back to that restaurant. I didn't drive past it either. It wasn't avoidance. It just didn't belong to me anymore. 3 months had passed since the hearing. The case had moved forward faster than most. When the structure collapses that cleanly, when the money trails are intact, and the timing is documented, there isn't much left to argue. Charles Harris was charged at the center of it all. That part wasn't surprising. What surprised people was how many others had been pulled into his orbit without fully understanding what they were sustaining. My father wasn't the architect, but he wasn't a victim either. He was something in between, and the law is very precise about that space. He took a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for full cooperation, documentation, testimony. It didn't erase what happened, but it changed the outcome. Ethan avoided prison. That was the part my mother held on to. He didn't know she said to me once sitting across from me in a quiet coffee shop a few weeks after everything ended. Her hands were wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. I know, I said. He's trying to fix things, she added. He's working with the investigators. He's different now. I believe that too. She looked at me carefully. You sound calm about it. I am. That's not what I expected. I gave a small, almost tired smile. I think you expected me to be angry. Aren't you? I thought about it. Not the way she meant. I said, for a long time. Just not about this. She didn't ask what I meant. Maybe she already knew. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said quietly, Your father asked about you. I didn't react immediately. What did he say? That he understands why you did what you did, she said, and that he wishes he had listened sooner. I nodded. That doesn't change anything, she added quickly, like she needed me to agree. It's not supposed to, I said. She looked relieved. And you? She asked. Do you forgive him? That word again. Forgive. I'd thought about it more than I expected. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet moments when everything else settled. I don't think forgiveness is the right question, I said. She frowned slightly. Then what is? Whether I can trust him again? I replied. And can you? I met her eyes. No, the word wasn't harsh. It was just clear. She looked down at her cup. That makes me sad, she said. It should, I said gently. But it's also honest. Another pause. Then she nodded. I left him, she said. I didn't look surprised. After the hearing, she continued. I stayed for a while thinking maybe things would settle. But they didn't. I waited. He kept trying to explain it, she said. Not justify it, just explain how it happened. And I realized something. What I had been part of it too, she said quietly. Not the money, not the decisions, but the silence. I didn't interrupt. I knew things didn't feel right, she went on. But I told myself it wasn't my place to question him, that he knew what he was doing. That's how it works, I said. It spreads responsibility until no one feels fully accountable. She nodded. I didn't want to be that person anymore. So you left? Yes. There was no drama in the way she said it. Just a decision. Are you okay? I asked. She thought about it. I'm starting over, she said, which is harder than I expected. It usually is. But it feels cleaner, she added. I understood that, more than she probably realized. I moved apartments a month later, not because I had to, because I wanted to. New space, new routines, not a reinvention, just a reset. The car was still there, the one the valet had handed me that night. It wasn't mine in the way my father had assumed. It belonged to a corporate fleet tied to one of the institutions I worked with, assigned temporarily during a project that required discretion and mobility. That was the part I hadn't explained. Not because I was hiding it, because it didn't matter. What mattered was how quickly people had decided what it meant. I sold my old car a few weeks after everything ended, not out of embarrassment, but because I didn't need to hold on to that version of myself anymore. Ethan texted me once, just once. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I stared at the message longer than I expected. Then I replied, Now you do. That's what matters. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. I still think about that night sometimes. The valet, the keys, the moment my father laughed and then stopped. Not because of the car, but because something shifted that he couldn't control anymore. That was the real turning point. Not the investigation, not the hearing, just that quiet realization that the story he believed about me was incomplete. I didn't win anything. Not really. I didn't get closure in the way people expect. There was no clean ending where everything made sense and everyone learned the right lesson at the same time. What I got was simpler, clearer. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. I stopped protecting relationships that depended on me staying small, and I stopped confusing loyalty with silence. That was enough. If you've ever been in a position where doing the right thing meant standing against your own family, You already know it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like loss and clarity at the same time. So I'm curious, where are you watching this from and what time is it there right now? I read more of those messages than you'd expect. And if you stayed with me through this, you probably understand why I tell these stories the way I do. You can subscribe if you want to hear more. No pressure. Just honesty. Sometimes the hardest part isn't seeing the truth. It's deciding what to do with it once you do. When the people involved are strangers, the answer feels simple. You follow the evidence. You apply the rules. You move forward. But when it's family, the lines blur. You start asking different questions. What do they mean to you? What do you owe them? What happens if you don't step in? And more importantly, what happens if you do? I learned that boundaries and revenge are not the same thing. Revenge is about making someone feel what you felt. Boundaries are about deciding what you will no longer carry. I didn't stop what happened to punish my father. I stopped it because it was wrong, and because every day it continued, more people would be hurt. That distinction matters. So does this one. Forgiveness doesn't mean restoring access. You can understand someone. You can even accept their apology and still decide they no longer get the same place in your life. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. If you've ever had to make that kind of decision, I'd really like to hear your story. And if you're still figuring it out, that's okay too. Take your time. This story is fictional, created for entertainment, education, and reflection, but the emotions behind it are real for a lot of people. And if that resonates with you, you're not alone.